At the start of the season, I honestly did believe that there was a pretty decent chance the Kraken could compete for a playoff spot. Now, obviously, that hasn't happened. Now, I still do think that for the most part, the Kraken have played better than their record reflects, but for whatever reason, what's happening? Oh no, it's finally happened, isn't it? We got faded. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where, yes, in the last game of March, the Kraken have officially been eliminated from Stanley Cup contention, or just going to the playoffs in the first place. Now, hot take artists and connoisseurs of revisionist history all across the internet would tell you that the Kraken were eliminated from the playoffs after the expansion draft, but now they have been officially eliminated by the math. So yes, once again, the Kraken have officially become the fourth team mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, following the Montreal Canadiens, Arizona Coyotes, and Philadelphia Flyers, all eliminated before them. Now, for those of you watching the scoreboard to keep track of that first overall pick race, that doesn't mean the Kraken are now in fourth place there. The Flyers are still behind them by a few points. It's just that the Eastern Conference has a much higher top end, so the Flyers get eliminated quicker. And getting eliminated from the playoffs is no fun in the first place, but the game that the Kraken end up getting eliminated in was a particularly ugly one on top of that, where the Kraken end up getting shut out at home by the Vegas Golden Knights 3-0. Now, obviously getting shut out at home is a pretty ugly game no matter how you look at it for the Kraken, but this was a pretty bad game for both teams outside of goaltending. It just turns out to be worse for the Kraken than for the Golden Knights. For Seattle's part, they did come into this game with the exact same lineup they had just won with 6-1 in LA against the Kings, even including starting Driedger in net for the second game in a row. One of, well, the few times, I think it's maybe the second time now that he's started back-to-back games this season. And as far as Driedger's role and how this game would end up going, it has to be said as far as players on the ice for the Kraken, he was by far and away the best. That all having been said, that same line that scored 14 seconds into that last game against the Kings, that Wennberg, Eberle, Donato line, almost does it again in this game, nearly scoring once again 14 seconds into the game. And then the Kraken get a couple of more very good scoring opportunities in that first couple of minutes of this game, including Lind just by inches missing his first goal in the NHL. But in spite of all those good scoring chances that the Kraken get right out of the gate, they can't quite find the back of the net and instead end up finding the penalty box early on, sending the Golden Knights to the power play. Still though, it turns out to be a very good penalty kill from the Kraken that ends up getting as many shots off on goal in the Vegas net as Vegas gets off on Seattle. I mean, it's only one shot each team gets, but I mean, that's still a pretty good penalty kill. Unfortunately, while Seattle is able to prevent Vegas from scoring on the power play or really looking dangerous whatsoever, this power play for Vegas does serve to kill off that momentum that Seattle had been building early in the game. And really, the Kraken never end up getting it back almost at all during the course of the rest of this game. Vegas does end up getting another power play a few minutes later, though once again it's killed off very well by the Kraken, including another shorthanded chance, this time from Riley Sheahan, and coming off of a terrible miscommunication on the Vegas end, where they have a drop pass into their defensive zone to absolutely no one. Sheahan says thank you very much, goes, picks it up himself, and takes it in for the shorthanded shot, but is defended just as he tries to get the shot off, so the save ends up being a pretty easy one for Vegas to make. Or, I guess, Thompson for Vegas, where actually Leonard might end up playing on Friday as he was called up off the IR and was backing up Thompson in this game. From there, the rest of the first period is a pretty back and forth, largely uneventful affair. There are chances at both ends of the ice, but it's mostly played well defensively and not a lot of offense either way. So we end up getting to the end of a scoreless first period where Seattle has held their own and maybe even has the slight edge at this point in the game. It's hard to feel great about where they're at going into the second period, considering they haven't really been able to get all that much going, especially when it comes to high danger chances after that first power play early in the first. The Kraken do have one more push early in the second, that they do get a couple of more shots off on goal and some time in the offensive zone. Unfortunately, this does pretty much end up being the last time that they spend any kind of significant time in the offensive zone for the rest of the game, even including a power play that they would get shortly after. It is former Seattle Thunderbird Shea Theodore that ends up going to the box for the Golden Knights, which does remind me, I probably should have mentioned that in the first period, actually pretty early on, I think after that first power play, or maybe the second one. Either way, there is a big fight between Jamie Alexiak and Keegan Colasar, also a former T-Bird, that Alexiak eventually ends up getting the better of. Both of them end up going to the box for fighting, and then when they come out, Colasar ends up getting hit up high by Cheyenne towards the end of that first period, and would end up going to the locker room and not returning to this game. Hopefully, again, with him being a former Thunderbird, but just in general, he does end up being okay. For Cheyenne's part, it was a clean hit. It just unfortunately got him up in the neck and chin area as he was coming down as Cheyenne was laying the hit. So, a bit of an incidental hit. There was no call on the play. Unfortunately, it does cut Colasar's return to Seattle a bit short. For Theodore, though, back to the Seattle power play, as the Seattle power play goes pretty much nowhere, again, like we've become used to. In fact, even worse than this power play going nowhere for the Kraken, late in the power play, William Karlsson gets on a completely free breakaway after a turnover in the neutral zone, which fortunately Driedger is able to come up with an outstanding toe save on to keep out of the back of the net and keep this game 0-0, preventing the shorthanded goal. However, just as the power play is coming to an end, there's another Kraken turnover in the neutral zone that looks like it's going to lead to a shorthanded 2-on-1 chance, but that's just when Theodore exits the box, and instead of a 2-on-1 chance, it's a pass up to Theodore that gives him another completely free breakaway, and Driedger isn't able to bail out the Kraken a second time in a very short span, as Theodore is able to chip it over Driedger's pad and into the back of the net to give Vegas the 1-0 lead. So for Shea, certainly a more fun return to Seattle than Colasar ended up having. Unfortunately, it does come at the expense of the Kraken. And once again, just like the first period from there, which is still the vast majority of the second period that's left, it's a pretty back and forth, rather eventless affair until the very end of the second period. Unlike the first period, though, this second period is much more sloppy at both ends of the ice. Both teams are playing fairly well defensively, not letting a ton of shots to the net, and any shots they do allow are not particularly high danger ones. But offensively, and especially in transition, neither team can get out of their own way to create those scoring opportunities, which in turn does also make it pretty easy on the defenses to look good. Now, I did say up until the final few seconds of the second period for a reason, and that's because with less than 30 seconds left in the second, Marchessault gets a feed from behind the Kraken net and gets a couple of good scoring opportunities off on Driedger, both of which he's able to body down before eventually scooping the puck into his glove to freeze it. However, the Kraken end up losing that ensuing faceoff, and once again the puck finds its way to Marchessault in front of the net, who this time tries to go forehand to backhand and shovel it over Driedger's pad, but Driedger gets just enough of it with his toe going back the other way to keep this out of the net as well, keeping this game somehow still a 1-0 game going into the third. Again, like I said at the beginning of this video, easily the best player on the ice tonight for the Kraken, and also coming off of that strong performance in LA just a couple of days ago. As we get into the third period, if you thought that large chunk of the second period was an ugly, sloppily played affair by both teams, well, the third period was almost even more so, at least for the first almost 10 minutes of it. Okay, I guess it was just the first 7 minutes of the third period, but I mean seriously, if you just go and look at either the expected goals or Corsi graphs on, say, Natural Stat Trick, that first 7 minutes of the third period are pretty much just a flat line, basically saying they may as well have just not even played that at all because neither team made any effort whatsoever to try to put the puck in the net. I suppose for Vegas's part in that, they do have a 1-0 lead at this point, so as far as they're concerned, the entire third period could be a flat line as long as it stays that way, but still, it doesn't make for a terribly interesting game to watch. Eventually, Vegas is able to get the puck at least around the Kraken net, and once again, it's Marchessault who gets the shot off, and once again, he's denied by Driedger. However, the rebound goes off of Driedger's pad and out into open space, where Amadio takes a whack at it as he falls to the ice, and it ends up, while the shot was going wide, going off of Larsson's stick on the other side of Driedger and into the net to give Vegas the pinball, accidental, dang it goal, and a 2-0 lead. Meanwhile, Larsson, who's had a number of these now go off of him over the course of this season and into the Kraken net, just stares at the ceiling, thinking to himself, really? Again? Off the ensuing faceoff, the Kraken are able to drive right into the offensive zone and get a couple of pretty decent shots off on the Vegas net, both of which are saved. And unfortunately, that's pretty much the best chances the Kraken have had since the first couple of minutes of this game. And even more unfortunately, it continues to be that way until late in the third period, through another Vegas power play that, to the Kraken's credit, also goes absolutely nowhere, making it 3 very good kills on the night for Seattle. Finally, with just over 2 minutes left in this game, so time definitely running out for the Kraken to make any effort to have a comeback here, they do make a push into the offensive zone and get a couple of more chances off on the net. They don't end up scoring, but they do at least establish a little bit of momentum in their favor, which they use to then pull the goaltender the next time there's a whistle and get back into the offensive zone 6-on-5, and it doesn't take very long at all for McCann to fire off a one-timer, and while that is saved, the rebound goes out to the other side where Eberle's able to whack it into the back of the goal and score to give the Kraken their first goal of the game and cut that lead in half. It's 2-1. This goal did have to feel pretty good for Eberle, who, it has to be said, after that first shift where the Kraken nearly scored, he did have a pretty tough game in this one, just constantly seeming like he was a little bit off of the pace of everything else going on around him, turning over the puck here and there and just not connecting on passes, whether it was him passing or having the puck pass to him. Either way, this does feel like that chance, and great. They're challenging it for offside, and sure enough, it doesn't take long at all for them to come back, announcing that this is in fact offside, and it's Eberle who put himself offside, passing it out to McCann, but crossing the blue line before the puck does. So the goal comes off the board, and it's still 2-0. And if the Kraken did have any momentum starting to build in their favor, leading to that Eberle turns out to be a non-goal, this overturned call does pretty much take out any gust of wind they still had left in their sails, and kills that comeback before it technically really even starts. Eventually, Marchessault does find the back of the empty net after a bit of a miscue along the boards. Doesn't really matter, the Kraken weren't going to come back at that point in the game anyway. And again, it's Marchessault who's finally able to put one into the Kraken net, now that Drieger's not in it to stop him. And so Vegas wins 3-0, keeping their playoff hopes alive and eliminating any little morsel of mathematical hope that the Kraken still had at the postseason, as, again, they're now mathematically eliminated, and Seattle will get another chance at Vegas in just 2 days. And unfortunately, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that what this shutout of the Kraken also means is that Sprong's streak of a goal in every game playing for the Kraken also comes to an end, even in spite of him once again leading the team in shots on goal, 4 in this game. I guess he still has scored in every away game the Kraken have played with him on the roster, so there's still that. And for what it's worth, although Drieger was clearly the highlight of this game for the Kraken, where there really weren't a lot of players that had great games, Sprong was one of the few skaters for the Kraken that I thought played pretty well in this one. He just didn't have a lot of help around him. Yanni Gourde also had a pretty good game. Again, it just doesn't turn out to be enough to make a difference here. And once again, as I've now said a couple of times, Seattle will get one more crack at their expansion rival in the Golden Knights in 2 days' time on April Fool's Day, once again in Seattle. Whether or not Schwartz or Fleury are back to play in that game remains to be seen. It kind of sounds like Schwartz might be another more longer-term injury, and at this point they might just shut him down for the season. Fleury, still hard to say, and regardless, there's a pretty decent chance with them getting shut out at home that we will see a little bit of mix-up in this lineup for the next game against Vegas. That having been said, they didn't mix up the lineup hardly at all after they laid an egg in that first game in LA, and with Drieger now having played 2 games back-to-back pretty well, he may very well start a 3rd game in a row against Vegas again. With that though, honestly, I just don't see much reason to spend any more time on this ugly game that the Kraken play against the Golden Knights, who also didn't play particularly well, but well enough to beat Seattle at least this time. So let me know down in the comment section what you thought of this game, if you thought I missed anything. And until next time, if you have made it to this point in the video, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy it, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. And until next time, again against the Golden Knights in a couple of days, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken.